Welcome everyone to the second Public Interest Technology Colloquium. Stories and ideas we love are always based on truth. My name is Katina Michael. I'm a professor and director of Society Policy Engineering Collective. And today our special guest is Miss Suzie Jowsey Featherstone from New Zealand. Welcome, Suzie.
Morena, good morning, everybody. Very early morning here for me, so it's a little dark and you'll see the sun come up. We're the lucky ones in the world to see the first rays of the sun. So thank you so much for being here today with me. I'm living here in New Zealand. And I'm a storyteller, and in that way I tell stories about people on film. I use the medium of filmmaking and documentary, and I have another hat where I write for directors. I write treatments for directors, and those are film directors who are perhaps working mostly in commercials. This is my day job, mostly in commercials, and I will explain to you in a little while what that treatment is. It's a technical document. So my passion is to really tell stories that are not about truth, not so much an issue-driven journalistic style of truth, but about human stories told in a heartfelt, experiential way. I tend to eke myself out of all documentaries. You don't see me, you don't hear me. I use people's own voices where possible. Interestingly, the one more issue-driven documentary I ever made is Where I Met Katina. But mostly they're what I would call human portraits. So that's my love. That's where I started. And just to give you a little bit of context as to how I became a filmmaker in that way, and also a writer of directors' treatments, I was in the UK and I was based in advertising. I was a creative in advertising. And I worked on, big brands and advertising agencies, and I loved it. What I loved about it was always, as a creative in advertising, you're like a person that's distilling a product down to its absolute truth. So I absolutely enjoyed that process of what was different about this pen, and what was its unique properties. Now, of course, in reality, and I found out over the years that quite often the truth wasn't what the client wanted. So eventually I did sort of leave that creative role in agencies. But during that time, I was very fortunate to have a very dear friend who was a producer-director for Access Hollywood and Entertainment Tonight, two shows that are in America you may be aware of. And during that time, she actually became unwell. She was in hospital, and she asked me to step in and help her out. It was the year after Princess Diana died, and I was to take Nancy O'Dell, who had flown over to London, and go to Kensington Palace, and we were to do a piece to camera. Very simple, very easy. I had a good background in do this. It's not hard. I had my list of questions. There was nothing tricky there. So off I went with my cameraman, Soundy, and Nancy, and we were in August in the sunshine outside Kensington Palace, and it was quite beautiful. I get a phone call at that time, and I'm telling you the story because it became sort of pivotal for me. I got a phone call from back in America, and they said, drop the story now. Linda McCartney has died. You need to go to Paul McCartney's place and film a little piece with Nancy there. I'm like, right, okay. Yeah, I don't know where Paul McCartney lives. So I say to my cameraman, can you tell me where Paul McCartney lives? And he said, yeah, I think he's somewhere down the way. Look, let's jump in the car, let's get going. So great, okay, Liv knows where we're going, hoping that he really did. It became quite evident he didn't know where we were going eventually, but we ended up in in a little village, and I could tell from the look of my cameraman's face that he was completely clueless as to where we had to be. So I dropped them off. I saw a building being scaffolded by a whole bunch of guys. So I dropped the team off at the pub and went and spoke to these men and said, "Can you help me, please? I need to know where Paul McCartney lives." And they went, "Oh, no problem. We don't know the actual house, but he's at the next village. Take that road, next village, Peasmarsh, off you go." So we did. And when I got there, I got to the pub and thought, this will be the best port of call. I'm going to go into the pub. Walked in with my clipboard and went up to the publican there and unexpected look at me and told me to get out of the place. There weren't any reporters there that somebody had died and they weren't interested in having us on the premises, which I of course never expected, and thought, oh God, okay, what do I do now? So I said to him, look, okay, fair enough. Can you direct me to a place where I can get a lovely shot of the village? Somewhere high would be good. And he went, okay, go up the road there to the church at the top of the hill. And I said, thank you, and off we went. We got up to the church at the top of the hill, and there was a Sparky, an electrician who was rewiring the church, and Nancy, we decided, okay, this is as best we're going to get. Let's just do a piece to camera announcing Linda's passing. I grabbed the electrician and said, "Did you know Linda? And were you able to tell us anything about her and what she was to the village?" And he did, and I don't think Nancy was terribly impressed with what that was sounding like as he was talking about jam and all sorts of things. So I could tell this is not really going to work, but we had a little piece in the can that was kind of okay. It certainly wasn't what they were expecting of me, but that was probably the best I could do. As I was about to leave, I turned to the electrician and I said, "I guess you wouldn't tell me where Paul lives, would you?" And he said, "No, but if you drive down that road there and you see a couple of guys sitting on a gate, that's it." Right, okay. And so we drove down. It was a gravel road, and we drove down. And sure enough, I thought, okay, let's drive past them and go down the road a little bit and see if we can see a house in the distance. Sure enough, there was, quite distant, but a big home that was set in the countryside. So I got Nancy and set her up, beside some beautiful trees and clearly the home in the background, and said, let's do a piece here, that'll be fine. And she was able to refer to this being Paul McCartney's home. And in the next minute, the guys who had been on the fence came running down and started tackling us and taking our cameras off us, and it got quite kind of heavy. And I said to them, please stop that. We're not actually breaking the law. We're on public ground here. And don't break our camera gear, please. And they stopped, and the man shouting, do you want? And I went, well, ideally, I'd actually quite like Paul McCartney, but of course that's unreasonable on a day like today. But his publicist would be really great. If you're asking me what I really want, that's what I want. And so he got on the phone and he passed me his phone. And now I had the shouting publicist shouting at me and telling me how terrible we are. And he also said to me, what do you want? And I said, well, look, my job here is to get this, to announce this sad day. What I want is, of course, Paul, but if you're available, why don't you give the story to Nancy and really do it beautifully? And he went very quiet. And he said to me, okay, meet me at the pub. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got to go back to the pub. But we went back to the pub and we were allowed, and we we recorded a very beautiful, very heartfelt story from a very sad publicist who had been clearly close to Linda and Paul. And it was a beautiful piece, actually. And so on the way back in the car, I said to Nancy, we've got a choice here to send them everything, satellite all back, and they'll cut together a piece. But you know what they'll do. And there were some better moments in that entire talk. So if you're okay, can we do a soft edit off the camera here and just feed them back the really beautiful, heartfelt story that we shot and that affected us so much? And she agreed. So we did that, and it was the first story to break in the world, and it went to Reuters and it went everywhere, and it was great. I felt like I never wanted to do another one of these stories again after that day. It was far too stressful, but I did go on to continue doing this. And what I learnt that day, seems that all my first day jobs are tough. I fully expect it now. But I learnt a lot that day, that to be honest and truthful and say exactly what you want and what you need and really respect everyone's needs. You know, I had to walk away from the pub. There was a big possibility I was going to have to walk away from the job entirely and say, this is not going to happen. I was quite willing to do that at the end of the day. And if anything you get from what I share with you today, it's those gems that take with you and hold them in the back of your mind, draw them, because they will really serve you in the long run with whatever you're doing, be it interviewing somebody you know, interviewing someone you don't know. So that was that story. And when I, after 6 years of doing that quite a few times, and I very much enjoyed it. I learned an awful lot about filming and about getting a story in a very fast turnaround situation. I would always be given the questions to ask. They generally were, quite issue-driven or whatever. They were driven in a way that I probably would never ask questions of people. So I did have my own way of working, but of course I always had to get the story. That was my brief. I always had to get their story. I'm sure they didn't like what I did every time, but they got, I managed to do it for a few years. And it wasn't my day job. I really only did that. But it took me all over UK and Europe, and I got to work on some incredible sets and meet some wonderful, wonderful people, absolutely superb actors. So it was a wonderful experience. In 2004, I was burnt out from advertising, and I never wanted to do another Hollywood story again. Came back to New Zealand, and what happened was that I thought, right, I'm not going to go back into agencies. What am I going to do? And my love had been filmmaking, so I approached TV New Zealand to see if they would let me do a documentary on Max Gimlet, who was a New Zealand artist, having a huge retrospective at the time in New Zealand. And he lives in New York. I'll play you a little clip of this documentary. But I was very, very keen at that stage to really dive into portraits about people and find out their truth. So let me now take you to the Max documentary and give you a little bit of a taster for what there was, a couple of minutes long, and it'll give you a taste for him and the style I took for telling that particular story.
lot of painters on my street. Mark Rothko straight across the road, Bryce Marden, Jake Berto, Roy Lichtenstein. The area was full of artists. This is my temple, a sacred space.
Max was very knowledgeable and familiar with New York painting from seeing a lot of it in the museums, and the whole tradition coming out of abstract expressionism, which he and his contemporaries in New York followed and were working through. So he was part of a tradition of New York painting that was very visible. I think it's useful to think of him in terms of his generation.
Distraught over politics, distraught.
He grew up in Puritan New Zealand. The art that precedes him has the marks of that repressiveness all over it, but in some sense throwing that all over.
One of the best reflecting devices is the skull that has endless patience. Your death waits for you. We don't know when it is, so we need to be daily prepared. I need to recognize, as the Buddha taught me, my deathbed and go into my death posture and link up with my teachers. Full circle, deep fathom 5, something comes around. Recognition.
So, Max, that was my first documentary, not the easiest documentary to make. He is a fantastic textural personality. I knew very early on it was not going to be that easy to be with him. He's not a people pleaser unless you're buying a painting with him. And so I thought it was very wise for me to get the story, to go and sit with him in his studio for a few days just prior to shooting. Again, with documentaries of about this duration, and it ends up being about 30 minutes long. It's quite fast turnaround. You shoot it in about 5 days. So I took a few days in advance, flew up to New York and sat and said to him, Max, do you mind if I come into your studio prior to this and sit there and go through your archive and decide what I can use out of your archive? He's an amazing archivist, to actually figure out what I'm going to use in the documentary. If you're happy with that, set me up in a corner and let me be there and go through everything. He did. He didn't set me up in the middle of his space. And you remember at the very beginning he says, this is my sacred space. And I thought, this is quite telling what he's doing here. He's putting me bang in the middle of his space. And there was a table there and surrounded by boxes. So I would spend a few hours every day going through his archive work. And in that time, he walked around me. He circled me like a wild animal circling the prey, really. It was very intimidating. It was very different. It really gave me an insight into his character. I knew it was very primal, and I guess I knew that he was going to have moments while I was shooting where I was going to be thrown into quite tough situations. And it did. It happened. Not that often. He was wonderful, actually, incredibly wonderful, but yet he would flare, and I had to be prepared for that. So I'm really glad I intuitively went and did that, because I was then ready. I was ready for whatever he was going to throw at me. At one point, that being hammer. So yeah, that was an interesting journey. I also had a real sense in my mind how I was going to tell this story, clearly that was quite different to anything you've ever seen on Access Hollywood. I was really into, come on, let me, I've got beautiful imagery here to work with. I've got a strong character to drive his story, and I've got to get that out of him. He's very willing to express himself, which is beautiful and a little unusual. And I wanted to pull the documentary together in a way that was truthful to him and his time. And that felt to me like if I made it more like beat poetry, which was what he was into, and in the prime of his life, moving into that studio. So that's what I did. I made a creative decision around that, not because it was what I liked, although I do like it. It was right for him and the story that, and his own particular story. So that really set my bar, if you like, for how I needed to continue as a filmmaker. Now, what happened was I made another documentary about opera and that process, that art process as well. But each one of these documentaries took about a year, to organize, produce and make. And I needed to actually have a day job. Very fortunate, and I was asked to come and write director's treatments for a production company here in New Zealand called The Sweet Shop. And I thought, why would I write another director's treatment? Now, I thought that all directors in film, people like myself, would just write their own treatment. And let me explain what a treatment is. When you write a script, when an advertising agency writes a script, or a script writer writes a script for film, it's exactly the same process. That script gets then farmed out, if you like, to a couple of directors who will direct that film, be it a commercial or be it a movie. And they read that script and they decide how they're going to approach it, what look they're going to give it, how they're going to develop the characters, how they will cast it. And as you can imagine, if a script was written and it went out to someone like Steven Spielberg to have a look at, and Quentin Tarantino to have a look at, they'd have very different approaches to that one script. So this is the process that happens. And I was looking at scripts, advertising mostly, although I've worked film scripts as well. But most of my day job is mostly advertising. And I get to step in and be that director and write their visual creative treatment for them. So it was back in advertising, but it was from a whole different angle. And it was at a point where I could be ultimately creative with an idea. So that was exciting. I could work with the director. At the end of the day, the I is not me, it's them. I'm ghostwriting it for them. And why would they do this? There's a couple of reasons. Some people are not writers. Some people are just not, that's not their thing. Some people are great on the call to the agency, but can't get it down on paper. Some people are just time pressed. So my job is to jump into their shoes, become them, like a frustrated actress almost, and be their voice. And when I am their voice, I need to write with their vernacular, write with the beat. We all have a particular beat in our voice, and I've had to listen to that prior to that by having a telephone call with them or a recorded call. Sometimes I don't get that opportunity to actually have that closeness prior. This week that came in, I never actually met the director. I never spoke to him over the phone. He was on a boat somewhere between Sweden and Italy in a storm. But I did get a clip of him talking to the agencies, and I was able to look at his work, and from that I was able to discern a style of how he would potentially speak and write. And that's my job. I jump in, I do that, I get about 48 hours, and I get 48 hours to produce something along the lines of this. This is for a director called Patrick Folletti. Okay, so here's a treatment. And this, as I said, gets produced in about 48 hours. I do the words, not the pictures. Somebody else is doing the pictures. This was a response to a Google script that came in for Australia. It's a really beautiful story. They know that how we use Google, we tap into our phones and we go and we ask a question, and it comes up with all sorts of answers and options. The story in the script was actually about a parent who was a Sudanese refugee, and his daughter was going to school, becoming an Australian kid, and she wanted to play football, and he knew nothing about football, so he could, ask Google. So that was the story, and this is the treatment I wrote for Patrick and with Patrick, to be able to come up to ideally win the job, and he did win the job, and I'll be able to show it to you in a minute. And so what we do is I write where he is at with it. Patrick was a good option for them because he'd already made a documentary about Sudanese refugees. So he was very clear. He wanted this to honor the reality of Sudanese people, and that it not be a sanitized advertising vision of them at all. It needed to be heartfelt. It was a dad trying to help his daughter, and so you can see even from the visual tone that we were giving at that very early stage, where it was just words on paper, this is where he wanted it to go. And so it's a big document. It's 41 pages, but you start to see what gets put together for them to even just win the job, and that's my role, for them to hopefully help them win the job. And he did, a beautiful job of it, and I'm going to play that for you now. I'll just go.
Your destination is on the right.
Love is everything.
When you hand pass, just pretend you're scooping your ice cream.
Just like this. Yes, that's it.
Love is everything because love makes the world go round. Love is the foundation of our soul.
Your daughter's having a blinder.
What is a blinder?
And the love for someone or something is the greatest feeling that ever existed. Love is the greatest feeling that any person could have.
Messi, that was a blunder.
Thanks, Papa.
That's what love is.
So that was a story about fitting in, and it did really, really well. And it wasn't an easy journey for Patrick to take these. It's always quite hard to create the vision you absolutely want when you have a client and an agency involved, but it came out quite well. And what I would say about that, it was a heartfelt story. And when stories are heartfelt, they really resonate, they do work. It was about love. Love is truth. It's exactly the same. So the more you can tap into your personal truth to when you're interviewing people or when you're writing a document, I would advise you to absolutely do this because it pops off the page. In this case, it won him the job, and then the job wins, once he's actually created it, it then wins him more jobs. So that's what I do sort of day to day. But I also, after that, I was asked to step into the role of being a director, writer for a documentary thread called Attitude Live in New Zealand. It's been running here for over 10 years now, and it started off as a very small segment and it's grown to what it is now. It's the largest disability documentary thread in the world, and they called me up and said, would you come and make documentaries with us? Sometimes, not all the time. I didn't want to be absolutely employed to one company because I was doing my work with directors. Otherwise, it was going to be maybe a couple of documentaries a year, and I said, absolutely, I'll do this. And why it excited me was, again, it was making human portraits that were heartfelt. One of the first documentaries I made, I'll go back to my first, my mother was dying. My mother had Alzheimer's, and I say she was dying at the very beginning of the documentary. She was quite good. We didn't know how long that would go, and I didn't know quite how this was going to unfold. But there was a situation that we really identified as a need here, and probably everywhere. Particularly if there was a husband and wife situation, the male partners are often overlooked when it comes to dementia and Alzheimer's, and you have a split that happens in the family. They're living with their partner, usually in their latter part of their life, enjoying what they think is going to be their last, 10 years or whatever. And then this happens, and they have to let go of that person, either into a facility, which is what happened with my father. It is a documentary that you can watch. It's a good half hour, and it's called Together Apart, I'm sorry. And yeah, it was really, the drive there was to show my father's journey. What happened, and what often happens, is that it also became my mother's journey, and to an extent mine as well. So I'll show you a little bit, and I'll just show you some of the tough situations that, as a storyteller, and when you're just getting the story, one has to step into. So I'll just give you a little clip here of my...
Take big steps. Yes.
Are you sleeping in here?
Yes, your bedroom. There we go. Now we'll just... Here we go. There we go. Is that better? How's that?
That's good. Is that my husband?
That's your husband. Oh, God.
There wasn't much use of the show.
Oh, you're fine. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Oh, golly. No. Oh, yeah. No, I'm fine. I've just got to get past this. There are no rule books. And you've got to make your own pathway in your own way for each case. So I've learned a lot. I've been there at my dad's death. I wasn't there for my mother's death, but soon afterwards. But nothing has been like this one.
So yeah, you can see it can get quite tough when you're doing human portraits. And I was stepping into disability. And yes, I made a very personal one to start with. Strangely enough, I didn't find that one so hard to do. I was obviously very close to everyone, and I included it's the one time I did include myself because it was appropriate to. Normally I would never do that, but it was appropriate to, and members of my family as well. And I watched, it was in the very beginning when my mother was first admitted into the care home. She was in quite good shape and she was quite fun, but the deterioration journey and what my father had to do back at home, now learning to iron his own, just live alone, live as the life of an elderly man living alone in his own space at his age. So that was that particular one, and it went on. I went on to make many others in the disability sector, and I guess being in this, I was always going to get quite tough situations. And I'm going to play you another clip. And the interesting thing about this clip was a little bit of my own. I didn't quite get it right. I really didn't ask enough questions of Sophia at the beginning. And I took this young woman who had fallen off her horse and become a tetraplegic overnight at the age of 19. I was on the first day of shooting, taking her back to where this happened. She was completely okay. She knew this was what was going to happen, and had been always fine to me over the phone when I discussed it with her, and there was no issue there, I thought. But I actually had never asked her the question, have you been back there before? I found that out interviewing her that morning, my first day of shooting, my first day of actually meeting her face to face, that we were going to go and see where the accident happened for the first time. So let me play this for you again. It was a little bit long, but I'll come back to you afterwards and discuss how it happened.
I was the horse, and then he spooked at something. He bolted, and I couldn't hold him back. And that's when I fell off and broke my neck.
The phone rang and they did not try and sugarcoat it. They told us that she was a complete tetraplegic, which means that there's no messages coming down from the point of injury.
Ready? Today we are going to the racing stables where I started and ended my career. I haven't actually been there since my accident. I've got a vague idea of where I had the fall. That's where it broke? That bit there?
Oh, wow.
So the horse broke that, or I broke that?
You broke that.
You right? It's been hard for you, I guess, as well.
the horse that fell off. I don't have anything against the horse. I just won't promote.
So it was a tough first morning shooting. And between her seeing the fence where her little body had broken that fence, and us going to then see the horse that was very much shot in that sequence, I said to her, Soph, I'm so sorry, do you want me to stop? This is full on. And she went, no. Classic Sophia, beautiful Sophia style. She went, no, let's keep going. And the documentary does go on. I'd really encourage you to watch that, because it's incredibly upbeat, and she's an incredibly upbeat girl, and it becomes a really wonderful story of fortitude, really, and positivity. But it was I had that moment. Do I keep rolling? Do I keep probing? What do I do here? And I stayed with it. And I would encourage, again, when I'm trying to make this relevant to whatever situation you're in, and interviewing people for whatever reason, be it if you're developing something for them, to go deep, but be willing to pull back and hold space for them, and be strong, and to, really be strong. You have to draw on yourself, and it's not easy sometimes, to be really honest with you. Sometimes I've been in situations where it's been intensely sad. There was a man who was young man, he was in his 30s. He had a beautiful family, Māori policeman, and he was dying of motor neuron, and he didn't have long, and he wasn't accepting what this was going to happen, and it was so hard. And so what did I do? Shooting this, it was like, at one point I just said, I need a break, and kind of went to the bathroom and had a cry. Other times I will cry quite openly in front of people, but then there's a point too where you have to kind of pull the energy up again and bring them back. So I would say, whatever spiritual practice you have, draw upon it, be it within just a fortitude within yourself or whatever. Use whatever you've got. But if you do have this opportunity to be in people's lives and interview them, go deep. You will get the truth of what's going on for them, particularly if they're in compromised or fragile situations, which I think maybe part of the coursework that you will be doing is about fragility in society. And for you to be able to go deep, you have to give something of yourself as well. It's really important that you connect. The biggest thing I would say, listen with your ears, but listen with your heart. Listen to what's being said, record it, and then go back and listen again, because you will hear so much more. With directors, when they're taking the brief for their treatment, I get them to record the Zooms or calls if possible, because what happens is they will ask the question of the agency, have I got room to change the script? And quite often the agency will go, yes. And the way they say yes might mean no. And I can hear that. I hear that on behalf of them. At the time, the director generally will just hear yes and go, yay, I can do, I've got free rein here. And I understand that. They're on a roll. I'm there to kind of go, it's not quite the truth. And so listening is everything, but it's not just listening with your ears, it's listening with your heart, as I say, and empathy, and going in deep with that person and sharing with them and allowing them to then give you something of themselves that may be really, really helpful. My process, I research, I then pick them, perhaps go and see them if it's local and I can. But we hit the ground running, really, shooting. I have all my questions sorted out. And then I get there on the day and I put my questions aside. I know them. And I then kick off and we go into an interview situation. And what unfolds will be other threads that I haven't thought of. They will tell you stories, they will come up with stuff that you haven't considered. And at that point you need to go off on that little tangent because there will be gems in there. And so you do that and you stay present, and then at the very end I go back to my questions and sort of say to them, give me a minute, please. Did I forget anything here? And then I, might do some backups with some questions and have a little think and take a moment. Have I got the story here? Or do we need to do some more probing? And that can be coming at another time. It's exhausting for people. When you're living with disability, it's exhausting. And they might be the carer, they might be the parent of an autistic child. It's exhausting. So giving them the leeway to step away, to come back is really important. One of the great projects I worked on was St. Lucy's, one of my favourite ever documentaries. And St. Lucy's, why it was a favourite, I had no expectation really when I walked in there. I knew it was a school for disabled children in Sydney. I knew they had a vast range of disabilities in there, which was a little unusual. Specifically, it wasn't a mainstream school, it was specifically for disabled children. It had been started by the Dominican nuns back in the 1930s as a school for the blind, but of course we have sorted blindness out in the world pretty much now, and there are very few fully blind schools there. So over the years, I think through the 70s right through to the 80s and 90s, they got a range of other disabilities they were starting to accept. And now they have quite a broad range. It was a very difficult documentary to make technically. The noise was unbelievable. And there is no wrangling these kids, The pace that they work at is amazing. And but what blew me away was the one-on-one appreciation of each child. Let me play for you a couple of clips from that, and we'll talk about that. And I'm going to play you the opening to the doco, which gives you the opening for a day school. Every single day is like this for them at St. Lucy.
Love is the foundation for any good education. And it's really important for the child to sense that, to get that, to feel it. And then, feeling secure from that platform, well, they'll be challenged, they'll have a go at anything, and able to be a bit courageous and step out of the comforts that are new, and that's how we learn.
All good. All right. We're off.
And so it's really important for children as they come into school that they actually feel loved, that they feel cared for, they feel nurtured, that they feel safe.
Okay, I'm going to go straight to another clip because I think it's appropriate to give you just a sense of the technical difficulty. I would say love is the basis for all your projects. If you love what you're doing, if you love what you're creating, then make that the basis for everything and be open to being very, very fluid, because you are going to get thrown off track.
About 70% of our children have autism. Many are non-verbal and have real challenges of how to engage with the curriculum.
Everybody else, we are going to be cooking.
Our whole focus really is very much the individual and what's going to benefit the child. All our teachers are experts in their field, and we want the children to really find their language for learning. Here at St Lucy's, there's a focus on literacy and numeracy. One of the challenges, of course, is one child with autism is different to the next child with autism. And so a lot of the research indicates the visual way of helping children actually gain an understanding of their world. We find that the creative arts is the sort of gateway in.
So my role at St Lucy's is the head of creative arts. So I came here for what was going to be one term as a drama specialist, and then they kept me.
1, 2, 3.
We want the creative arts to be about two things. The time in the studio should be a time for expression and self-exploration, and it should complement the learning that they're doing in their classroom. So in drama, we want to build their articulation and their vocal projection and their capacity to work together. Visual art, we really want them to learn some good technical skills around drawing and form and composition and line.
Up higher, so it does a splash. Yeah.
So you can see, you know, those assemblies happen every single morning. Luckily for us, it was really, really hard. They're hugely noisy, and I was looking at my cameraman who was right across the assembly hall, and my soundy was at the back, and I looked at them and just said, oh, what do we do here? And we just shot it. There is no rehearsals. We just shot it and trusted, and both of them are technically really good, but trusted it was going to be okay, and it was. And we then, with that story, we focused on a couple of different people with different disabilities. One was highly functional, one was highly, very sort of non-verbal to a degree. To a degree, she'd actually been non-verbal. I'm going to show you that now. Jess, to give you a sense of how they have to actually tap into the person, exactly what we're doing, what you will be doing when you are interviewing and looking at people that you need to get information out of, and finding a key that works for them.
We kind of always knew there was something special or non-typical about Jess. She was 5 when she was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Jess is a really clever girl. Just when she is anxious, will completely shut down. So we went to a mainstream school, but doesn't cater for special needs, and we had a few difficulties there, didn't we?
Yeah, unfortunately, we found out that
they refused to make any adjustments for her or for her condition. She was so anxious, she would sit there and rock and shake and cry. She didn't speak at the school.
And once we realised that finding a school that is open-minded enough to actually accept her for who she is.
Initially, we were really hesitant to put Jess into a school that only catered for children with special needs. We thought, will it label her? Is she going to pick up behaviours from other children? Will she go backwards? But from the minute we came in for orientation day, we knew that this was the place for her.
Jess? Jess, would you like to come tell your news?
Head up though, like a big girl. Hello. And we say, hi, Jess.
Hi, Jess. So tell me, what did you get?
A new magazine.
And what kind of magazine?
Pink.
My experience with Jess is she comes across as quite shy. To use the skills that she does have, because she does have quite a lot.
I have a question.
Oh, there's all this question, Jess.
Jessica, look at me. What you got? Jessica, you need to look at me. I got a magazine.
Yeah.
Jessica, look at me shoulders. Turn around, like a big girl.
That's it.
Look at me. Did the shop have just magazines, or was it a toy shop? Toys and magazines. Toys and magazines. Come and sit down. Can they have a break? After drama.
Coming to drama is actually not an easy thing for Jess because it's outside of her routine. So to do anything different can be a little bit daunting, can be scary, and that's okay and that's all natural, but we still want to include everybody. And I try and make a connection with everybody, and it's just finding the key. And for today, it was about her being the princess.
Sky, you go, woohoo!
After you see a place like St Lucy's with the class numbers and the specialist care, she's doing things we never thought would be possible, certainly not within a year or two of starting school.
The approach of the school has created a Jess that we didn't think was possible.
So it is an amazing school, and there were so many stories like that. It was hard to shoot because also every door locks down. Those kids are all of various needs, and they're all able to scupper out the door and escape at any moment. But there was an incredible sense of happiness there, and nurturing and love, just so much love. And out of that, they were able to teach kids to varying degrees. There's one young woman who ended up, she was able to sing for many, many years. Another kid was, he was able to be safe in the community. So what happened to him? He was able to read the timetables on the trains, and they do a lot of social engagement of society, how you can make yourself aware at a shop, and you could see what they were heading towards there. And so this little boy actually at one point got lost, and he was able to find his way home. And you know what, at St Lucy's, that's a total win. That's educating someone, that's giving them a skill in life that is going to keep them safe. And that might be as far as it goes in the traditional education system with that child. I'm sure it will go much further, but you know what, that's okay. They're like detectives, will be like detectives as well. Your goal and your drive should be to want to be a detective and really find out what's needed from you in the world. You're developers, from what I understand, of creative technology, and so finding out how to really apply your creativity in a way that's meaningful for the people who you are making it for is really important. We come in with assumptions. I would say leave your assumptions at the door the minute you meet your people, be it on Zoom or wherever you are. Drop them. Nothing will necessarily be as you think. I had a classic situation with a little autistic boy, not at St Lucy's, it was a different documentary, where I wanted to shoot him at lunchtime in a school, racing around with the other kids. I thought he'd be racing around with the other kids. He really was. I needed to put a sound device on him, mic him up, so that we could hear. He looked at me and said, "No, I'm not having that on." And I went, "Why not?" And he went, "Well, you can hear into my brain." And that little face in front of me was not going to hear anything different from me. That's what he believed. I then had to tell a white lie because we didn't want to be able to record him. We didn't want to chase him with a mic, a boom mic. So I said to him, what about I put it on you, but I turn it off, and then we won't be able to hear into your brain. And he went, okay. So of course I turned it on, and it was behind it. He couldn't see. But those are the fears and phobias and issues that you're going to encounter with. Later on, we were doing another piece with him, and he was an incredible pianist, and he was able to, he was playing the entertainer. He was 9 years old. And of course, I want to shoot it from a wide, and then I want to shoot a close-up of his fingers, and I want to get all the different shots. And I haven't checked in with him with that, and I've just sort of, this is my process, I'm just putting it on him. And so he played, and I said, that was great, right, we're going to do it again. And he went, no, we're not. No, I didn't get it wrong. I went, no. And I had to really think in the moment, because in his mind spirals very, very, very quickly, quicker than anything. I went, no, we got it wrong. I have to shoot it again because my cameraman didn't have the camera going. And so again, I lied to him, but it was a white lie, and he was able to, because he's at this point feeling that he'd actually got something wrong. That can be a highly activating situation for a child with autism. And he accepted that and went and did it one more time. I knew we were only going to get one crack at it one more time. That was it. It was never going to be any more. But we did get it. The interesting thing, the fascinating thing about that story is too that later on, when we actually laid it down in sound, the two recordings were within a 100th of a second of each other. It was almost impossible for a human to be able to play with that accuracy. It was very incredible. So these are some of the things that you may have, you may encounter. I would also, we're just coming up for time here, I would also really advise you to, you may be on a Zoom, to look around, to take notice of everything else, the environment someone's in. It says so much about them. Even if they would be so kind as to pick up their laptop and walk you around the room and show you stuff they love. It's so telling. And that can spark another conversation. It can take you to another place. It can give you so much more. So be inquisitive about them as people. Be sensitive to, people of different cultures. I wonder if I have time, Katina. I'll probably do it. I've got a little clip that I'm going to play. I didn't make this, but it's a really beautiful story that we've made. We're in lockdown here at the moment in New Zealand. Very unusual. We haven't really had lockdown before because we've been COVID-free, but we have it at the moment. We've got a handle on it. And so to keep everyone happy or sort of feeling okay, they created this very beautiful piece for Auckland only. That's where I live, the city here, and we're the only ones in lockdown at the moment. To just, to make us stop and think from an Indigenous point of view. Māori is our culture here. We tend to pepper our language. This morning I said to you morena, which is good morning in Māori. We pepper our language with Māori. Not so much Pacifica, but Māori. And this piece was actually created for us in the vernacular, is what I would say, in the sense of the way the story is told, to just bring some calmness to us in Auckland, and really to let us stop and breathe. I think it's a very transparent snapshot of the kind of government that we have too, which we're very, very lucky to have.
Stop. Listen. Papa Tuanuku, the Earth Mother, is breathing. Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, still. Our maunga, our mountains, standing strong. Our moana, our ocean now louder than ever. Our tui and our keriru now need not fight with the daily hum of our busy lifestyles. Normally loud and joyful, now soft and distant, waiting for the right time to rise again. Our land renewing, replenishing, ready for your return. And our kai, our food, preparing to nourish. Enjoy time with your partner, your families, your loved ones, and soon we'll unite again. Noho tawhiti tū kotahi. Sit at a distance, stand as one. We, our land, our waters, our people, we aren't going anywhere. Dream, and when the time is right, we welcome you. But for now, listen. Papa Tuanuku is breathing.
So that's what it's like here at the moment. And it's a very beautiful meditative message to stop, to listen, to understand. It's not easy, but it's beautiful too. Find the beauty. Find the beauty in people's stories. Find the beauty, sometimes even in their pain, and bring your creativity to it in a way that is going to be meaningful for them. So I think that's me. I think I've talked enough. Have I, Katina? And please throw it open to any questions that anyone may have of me.